Hey there, everybody. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from, of course, the Philanthropy Mastermind series. And it's so great to have you back here. We are going to be doing some pretty serious conversation about boards today with one of the top people in the field. So I hope you'll be able to stick around for all of it and be an active participant in it. You can do that either through the chat or through the Q&A. Take your pick, use it as much as you want. I'm going to also do a little inventory question up front to help our guest today know who's in the audience so she can really tailor her conversation to you and your needs and interests. But before we do that, I want to thank, of course, our sponsor and DonorSearch, who's been our sponsor of this series going back to 2016. It's pretty amazing. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of episodes, and you're going to find many of them in recordings over on the DonorSearch site, which is at DonorSearch.net under the resources tab, along with our calendar of all the stuff coming up this year. Because if you've been paying attention to the series, you may have noticed that we are now doing 2 sessions per week and 1 podcast per week. So it's a lot of stuff out there. And of course, we're placing that all on YouTube and at the DonorSearch site for you to enjoy afterwards and to share with your friends and colleagues. We also have a little survey at the end. So I want to encourage you, whenever you depart today, to fill that out and let us know what you want to see and hear for the rest of the year. We are paying attention throughout all of our programming. And wow, we are really seeing the chat blow up. So I'm so grateful for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Everybody, Susan and Joseph, Denise, Marianne, oh man, Moira, Stephanie, Mary Kate, Rebecca, really, really helpful. And I really appreciate that many of you are also saying the kind of institutions that you are tuning in from. That's going to be helpful today because, of course, the topic is, as you know, reimagining board engagement, why you must rethink how you engage your board. And our guest is someone who can speak to the breadth of nonprofit boards in the US and probably beyond. But she also has particular reputation in the area of healthcare philanthropy. And so it'll be helpful for her to know which kind of institution you work at. So if you haven't had a chance to fill this in yet, just maybe say where you're from, institution you're at. If it's not clear what type of institution it is, tell us that too. All that is great. Oh man, Jody, Denise, Sarah, Michaela, Nan, oh, I really appreciate this. Thank you all so much. And now I realize I'm still leaving out in the wings our guest today, who is the magnificent, of course, Betsy, who's going to be joining us right now, Betsy Chapin Taylor, who, of course, is the CEO of Accordant. If you're not familiar with Accordant, I want to encourage you to take a look at that. We'll make sure there's a link to it in the chat, but you can find them at accordanthealth.com. Betsy is not only the founder and CEO of that company, but she has been a real force in our sector for, well, close to 3 decades. And as a person who's a voice for not just this issue of boards, but for healthcare in general and healthcare philanthropy specifically, you can see her name on the spine of so many books. She told me not to read them all to you, so I'll just take the top 2. That includes Healthcare Philanthropy, Advanced Charitable Giving to Your Organization's Mission. Let me see, Boards and Philanthropy, apropos of this topic today, Developing the Next Curve Revenue Source for Healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you can, after today, just go take a look for her work. And not only at Accordant, but the videos that she has posted speaking about this topic. I know that you will enjoy them and enjoy sharing them with colleagues, but we're going to jump in now today. Thank you so much, Betsy, for being here today.
Thank you, Jay. Great to be with you.
I know you've got a lot to share, and I know we're going to jump right in, but hopefully you can see in the chat some of these organizations that are here. So that gives you kind of a landscape of the breadth of the folks in the room. It's nice. It's a nice audience, and it's also lots of different kinds of organizations.
It's amazing. So thank you, all of you, for coming. You're from arts organizations and parks and social service organizations and hospitals and so many organizations. So I'm delighted to see the mission that you serve.
Now, today, I know you're going to take us on this journey. So how would you like to begin?
Let's just jump in and see where we go next. I definitely have a few things that I want to share with you today, but I also want to have time to talk to my great colleague, Jay, because we always have a good conversation about the issues, the opportunities, and where we go forward. So Jay, if it's all right, I'll just charge forward.
Please.
All right. So we are going to talk today about reimagining board engagement. That's in part because when I talk to many of you, and frankly, your board members, you kind of feel like this. You're banging your head against the wall. You are frustrated that your board is not delivering the value that it could or that you feel it should. Board members, on the other hand, are saying they don't have the tools they need to be successful, that they're similarly frustrated. They feel like they're being called to do low value tasks that are not always commensurate with their intentions or what they feel they could contribute. And so in many ways, we've been at an impasse. If you go to any not-for-profit conference, they're talking about the challenges of not-for-profit boards. And I feel like there've got to be ways for us to heal the situation and come back. And so what I want to talk about today is how we reimagine our relationship with boards. How do we go to a new place? How do we get to a place that is mutually satisfying, mutually effective for board members and the organizations that they serve? With that, I want to kind of go to the future state, because I think it's easier sometimes to imagine ourselves in this ideal position and then figure out how we got there, than it is to take kind of incremental, tiny changes over time to get to a new place. So this is the place where I would like for us to live. We have a highly engaged team of community leaders who bring their insights, influence, intellect, and investment to advance the mission of the foundation or nonprofit, whatever your organization is, you can put it in there, by fostering vibrant and growing philanthropy, creating impact through deploying funds to strategic projects, initiating and deepening relationships with stakeholders and partners, while also fulfilling legal fiduciary responsibilities. So if that's our aspiration for our future state, what we would look like if we were firing on all cylinders, I want to confront with Jay today some of the problems, the failure points, also the opportunities, just so hopefully you can walk away today with a scribbled little list of things that you want to go back and do with your board. So Jay, before we jump into those, any thoughts on just the aspiration itself?
Wow. It's a big question. I mean, the idea that we're trying to get the community leaders to bring their insights, that's broadening already. It seems like the discussion about boards in the last few years especially has been one of, do we want people who have money, or do we want people who have some measure of influence? And I mean, at least judging from this, I think it's possible to have both, isn't it?
I believe it is. And I think that we need to go out there with the audacious intention to attract people who are going to bring not only their insights and their influence, but also their investment. And their investment doesn't have to be significant. It has to be commensurate with their own means and with their intention to advance the organization. So I do think we tend to get a little bit over-indexed sometimes on how much money someone has, but people can do so much for the organization, even if their own personal wealth is not consistent with being able to give a significant gift.
Mhm.
So let's jump into some of the issues. At Accordant, we talk about a lot of things related to boards. And, while we have primarily served health organizations, this really is consistent for any of you sitting out there working for social service, working for arts, working in a lot of different spaces, because there's a lot of just framework around board governance that is really the same from industry to industry. And so we start by looking at things like intention, mission, vision, values. What does the governance infrastructure look like? All of these things that come together to create an exceptional board experience. But I wanted to call out today some of the things that I find people struggle with, or places that I often see the largest area of opportunity. First, it's around selection. So often I'm invited to come in and do a board retreat for folks, and they say, we just have the wrong people around the table. Well, the wrong people around the table is not corrected by training. It's corrected by starting with selection in the first place. And so, one of the things that I would encourage you all to do, if you get nothing else from our time together today, if you have one of those little sheets in your office that says, marketing person, accounting person, human relations expert, please throw that grid in the trash, because on one hand, it does nothing to move your organization forward. We need to be thinking about things from a really different perspective. So I always start first with board members around commitments. Do they love your mission? Do they have a passion for your work? Because if they don't love what you do, they shouldn't be talked to about being a board member anyway. We also need to make sure from a commitment standpoint that people bring basic things like integrity to the work. Second, we need to think about competencies. What are the skills, the experiences, the superpowers that someone is going to be able to bring to the work that can advance the organization? Those competencies in some ways could be aligned with their profession, but I believe it goes beyond that. Next, what kind of connectivity do they have? Where are their social, civic, and professional networks connected? Who do they have the ability to introduce us to bring us into relationship with? And then finally, what are their other characteristics? We need to make sure that we pull people around our table with a diversity of perspectives and life experiences. And so that connection or characteristics bucket allows us to do that. So Jay, you've been in the sector for such a long time. What are your thoughts on board selection?
Well, I love the idea of taking that old grid and then at a minimum shaking it up, and making it more more tied to values. Because when you're talking about commitment, for example, I mean, even there, I think maybe there's a tendency on one of those grids, as you said, to say gives at a certain level. But what you're talking about is a lot deeper and richer. But I'm interested, Betsy, how do you measure that? How do you? I don't want to bring us back to just a chart, but what are some of the things that you look for that demonstrate that commitment, especially if the organization hasn't fully engaged with people before, and so it hasn't given them a chance to demonstrate that commitment?
Sure. So, I really think about a board selection framework as being like a funnel, that all of the people who go into the top, so to speak, they have to have those basic things: a commitment to the mission of the organization, demonstrated integrity. If they don't have those are table stakes. Take them off the list. They shouldn't be there in the first place. Once we go through the funnel, the next level of the funnel then is around competencies. The competencies your organization is searching for today should be aligned with the things that you need to do as an organization. So that's where you go back to your own strategic plan and say, do we need someone who has a skill set in this or that? How would this understanding or experience help us to go forward? That's a place that I don't think even there we're talking yet about money. So when we get a little bit further down and we start talking about connectivity, that's where connectivity starts to come into a little bit, because, are they, first of all, moving in circles with others who live a charitable lifestyle? I always find it a little bit off-putting, frankly, when board members are interviewed and they say, oh, well, I'm not going to have to give, am I? Is there an expectation I support the organization? Well, if you don't have a genuine heart to support the organization, why in the world should you represent it and be a steward of its mission? And so when we get down to talking about connectivity, we get to talk about, who are they moving in circles with? Are they folks who are philanthropic in nature? Are they people who would want to get behind our organization as advocates or as, partners, as volunteers, as donors? That's a place that we can start to kind of see where we are. But again, it's a funnel and it's narrowing down. If we find that people are not a good fit for our organization, at each point, we ought to be able to push people out of the process, because I believe that there are people who meet all of our criteria who are ready to come around our table. We just need to go search for them.
So with the last piece, with that connectivity, you talked about social, civic, and professional. That's a big wide net.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing when we're thinking about going beyond just our circle of friends and the people who are already giving to us. What are some of the other things that we might watch for when we're trying to keep an open mind as to people who might fit these criteria? What are the places that we're looking to find folks who fit this mold?
Yeah, I would, I think it almost is an old Malcolm Gladwell kind of thing, find the people who know the people if you don't know the people. I think too often we sit around a boardroom table and we say, oh, who do I know from the other boards I'm on? Who do I see in the school pickup line? Who do I go to church with? We need to look at our own networks, but we need to also look at who our network is networked with to figure out who we're going to pull around the table, because we need to know what that right list of skills and competencies and capabilities and characteristics is. And then we need to go sometimes search for those individuals. And so by working our own networks, we're better positioned to do that.
And Betsy, as you're going through this, I'd be interested to hear if anybody in the audience also is taking this kind of approach to board recruitment. So if you have thoughts on this, if you've been applying the kind of standard grid, or if you've been looking at these kinds of values-based approaches, we'd love to hear how you are applying these kinds of ideas to your own board recruitment.
Perfect. And with Jay, with that, I'm going to push on to the next thing. So we've invited people now to come and serve. Now we need to onboard them. Too many folks, they are invited to join the board. And the first time they really interact with us is when they show up at their first meeting. They don't have a nice entree into the organization. And so that means that they are immediately behind when they walk into the boardroom. And so I think we need to think about onboarding and orientation in a really thoughtful way. Onboarding for me is not an event. It's not an event for a variety of reasons. First, nobody wants to come and sit in a room all day and have you thumb through a mind-numbing amount of binder material about financials and budgets and past minutes and bylaws and all those things. It's just overwhelming. You need them to come to an experience that's going to give them the education they need to be successful, but also, frankly, that kind of moves and motivates them to want to be part of that work. I think you also need to consider adult learning styles, that the forgetting curve is a real thing, that if you hear something once and you don't reaffirm it or use it over a few times over the next couple of weeks, you're going to forget it. So instead, think about the arc of how you build an onboarding journey, an onboarding experience. And I would spread this out over as much as 8 weeks, where you're not only providing them with kind of formal lecture, the binder, a great board member handbook. Maybe you've got a one-on-one lunch, you've got a site visit, you've got a case study that you want them to walk through, that you're providing them with different types of experiences that address to different learning styles that engage people different ways. I love giving people access to a digital library or to on-demand virtual education, other things where they can immerse themselves. So, think about onboarding as a way that you're going to get people in the door and ready to go at their first meeting, not come to their first meeting and struggle to figure out where they're supposed to sit and what they're supposed to do.
We're seeing from Joe that they're really enjoying your suggestions here, especially the language of learning styles, adult learning styles. It'd be interesting to see if other people are going beyond the kind of, well, if those here with us in the room, if you have an onboarding process at all, because we've run into many organizations, or at least I have, where there doesn't seem to be a formal process, but maybe one that's more enlightened, that's over time, that lets people engage in ways that are meaningful to them and really get them kind of ramped up to be true advocates for your organization. We'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. And don't be reluctant to take on the tough questions. I wrote a board manual a couple of years ago because I kept hearing over and over the same things from board members. We were not talking to them about what their financial commitment needed to be. We were not talking to them about how you engage others in the mission. We were not talking to them about the fact that, frankly, fundraising was not something that was slick and swarmy and uncomfortable and embarrassing, but something that was noble and beautiful and connective in nature. And so, don't put aside the conversations that you think may make people uncomfortable, because they need to delve through that information. So either have it in conversation, hand them a beautiful board manual, make sure that it's part of the conversation. So I'll charge on. I think about your board as being like a pit crew. I know a lot of times you'll end up seeing boards displayed as like a crew, a rowing crew. I don't believe they're a rowing crew. A rowing crew, everybody gets in the boat and they do the same thing. In a pit crew, you need somebody to put the tires on, somebody to put the gas in, somebody to, deal with a lug nut, whatever it may be. Your board is going to come to this experience with different things they contribute and different ways that they can really add value to the organization. However, I believe that they're not going to do that if you haven't built the basic bedrock of trust. And so as part of your onboarding process, I would also consider how you're going to build relational fiber between people. It's the accumulation of interactions between board members that allow people to be comfortable saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't understand that. Or, hey, wait a minute, I have a tough question. Or I have a really crazy idea. We've got to build that relational fiber between board members. That means trust is kind of our culture in the boardroom. And that starts with onboarding as well. So think about even having a peer ally for someone who's coming on the board who can answer their questions, take them to lunch, introduce them to people when they walk in the room the first time, and doing other things that start to really set that this is a relational group as well. Any thoughts, Jay?
Well, I love that idea of pairing people up with people who have been there so they don't feel alone. Because one of the things I have heard consistently is they don't really know what they're supposed to do. They've shown up and that they're there, but then they don't hear anything between meetings. So it can't, this seems to provide a solution to one of the complaints that we often hear, which is that the staff is really busy. And if we want to make sure that people are able to be their best selves, that they need a partner, and that's going to be a peer. So when you've put that into practice, Betsy, how have you deployed that? Is that led by the chair who makes those appointments, like you guys are going to partner and you're going to partner, or how does that work? And when you find that the chemistry isn't perfect, how do you make adjustments also?
Yeah, so, on one hand, I see it as an arc. So the year you come on the board, you're a mentee. If you were last year's new board member, you're a mentor. So it means that you're connected to someone when you come on the board, and the next year you shepherd and take care of someone else new on the board, which gives you a chance to kind of learn information, share information, acclimate someone new, which really kind of enhances your own learning as well. So to think about this year's class, last year's class, pairing people up, and really ideally pairing people up who don't already have an existing relationship. So you're, again, creating connective fiber in the room. You're creating depth of relationships. I have thankfully never had a situation where someone came back and said, oh, this person's terrible, find me a new person. But maybe they just have ghosted each other if they didn't find that it was a good fit. Maybe that's something I need to mind for. But I think that often people are going to come to the board and find out that they have a lot of shared values and shared love of the organization. So hopefully they can find something to break bread over.
Absolutely. And by the way, we're getting great comments here just from folks who have some level of onboarding, but it's not necessarily always necessarily what they could do or would do. But we appreciate these comments. So thank you all for this. And Denise, that's quite a big one about the onboarding process. And you're inviting potential candidates to a board meeting so they know a little bit about you before they commit. That's something we didn't talk about in great depth, but perhaps you could visit that topic too, Betsy. I mean, much of what we're talking about is after the selection's been made, but what about for people who are not just that we're testing them to see if they're the right fit, but also they need to know if we're the right fit? How do you have thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I'm always in favor of dating before you marry. I think there is a space to invite people to come audit a board meeting prior to coming on the board, going on a tour, doing other things. But truly, even within the board onboarding process, I've encouraged leaders to give people easy exits. If somebody comes to your board onboarding and they're sitting there thinking, oh, why did I sign up for this? They are not going to then come on the board and be a willing and committed and happy member. And so it's inconvenient if you have offered them a slot and they have agreed to it for them to now exit the organization. But better to exit the organization now than when they're sitting around the board table, because you know what's going to happen. they are going to ghost you. They're just not going to come to meetings. They're not going to speak up. They're going to be the ones playing on their phones. They're going to be the ones who are late. And so if you find someone in the onboarding process that discovers it's not a fit, give them the opportunity to opt out now. You will be happy and they will be happier as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's go further. So one of the crazy mysteries of the world is I run into board members all the time who have no idea what their job is. They kind of intuit that they're supposed to come to meetings. They intuit they're supposed to be looking at the financials. But beyond that, they're really not sure what the role of a board member is. And so I would encourage you to have a formally written statement of roles and responsibilities for your board members to let them know not only what you hope they're going to do, but what does excellence look like? You know, when you come on a board, you don't want to come on to do a poor job. You want to come on to be exceptional and to add value and to benefit something you care about. And so being very explicit in sharing roles and responsibilities is both a gift and a kindness for your board members and for the organization.
Amen.
Amen, he says. Amen, he says. Absolutely. And to me, it's just so basic. Why do we not do this? You would not hire a new staff member without giving them a job description. It's just unfathomable that it happens all the time that board
But
members.
why? Why is that? Or is it a fear about codifying what people are supposed to do? Is it resistance to the things we ask? Are we afraid to ask them to do certain things? What's the cause of this?
I think that's part of it. I think people are afraid to write down, particularly, we need you to raise money. I think that people think, oh, well, let's just get them on the board. And once they're around the table, then we'll kind of land this on them. And then, hopefully they'll comply with that. I think we don't write down all the expectations because we are trying to be successful in securing their agreement to come on the board. And so we don't want them to think, oh, this is going to be overwhelming. There's a lot of work to do. However, again, it goes to, why would you want someone on the board who wanted kind of an empty job? You don't want the person on your board who wants an easy job to show up for lunch, a couple of times a year, whatever it may be. You want the person who's going to look at this and go, oh, I can crush this. I'll be great at this. And so being forthright, I think, is always an advantage. And once again, if you share the information and they opt out at the beginning, better than having somebody on your board who doesn't want to be there.
I know we have some people who are and have been board members in the room with us. And in fact, Rebecca had mentioned earlier about how important it was to have an onboarding process because in her case, she didn't have one in one instance. But I'd be very interested to hear with other board members who are with us if you have had a job description that you saw in advance of joining the board and that you were able to work with that, if it could be adapted, if it was tailored to your needs and interests as well as the organization. So any comments on that would be wonderful. And we do have a comment from Janet who just said, this is so true for low profile boards. This is a small shop. We struggle to have an active, engaged board. And again, I think maybe it's because this lack of clarity. So clarity is a wonderful thing. It's really good for the board members.
Clarity is a wonderful thing. It's good for everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep going then. So, talk about, clarity. Here we have this nice clear plastic bag over this little pig. You can imagine what that's about. We tend to, on boards, over-index on keeping our hand over the money and protecting the money. That's part of a board's legal and fiduciary governance role, but it's not a big piece. And yet we tend to spend a disproportionate amount of time, a disproportionate amount of energy focusing on keeping our hands over the money. So first, I would ask you to pull up and think about stewardship of money in a more holistic way, that the board needs to help bring money into the organization. They need to ensure that dollars are deployed for use in the organization, because sometimes when we're so intent on hiding it in an account or under a mattress or where else we're going to hide it, we're not actually deploying the work to do good. And donors gave us the work, the money to achieve impact. They didn't give us the money to, like, hide it in a can under someone's desk. They gave it to us to achieve impact. And then we need to make sure that we're investing in a manner that is actually conducive to growth. Too often we're trying so hard to be safe with our money that we stick it in an interest-bearing checking account that's not keeping up with the time value of money, because we're too afraid to put it in investment accounts. We also need to be very thoughtful about making sure that money is going to grow to keep pace with inflation. But I would say, like, overall, board members kind of know, oh, we got to protect the money, so we spend too much time here. But this should be less than 10% of the time that the board spends. And really, and I'm going to keep going, and then Jay, I'll pull you in. This is where we really need board members to be. Board members bring unique influence that is not replicated anywhere else in the organization in attracting people to the mission and inviting them to make a charitable financial gift to the organization. This is something that is a source of competitive advantage for board members, that they are seen by those in the community as honest brokers who are coming and sharing the value and the vision of the organization in a way that people hear it differently. And so we need to spend less time keeping our hand over the money, more time reaching out to connect with other people, to invite them to invest in this organization. So Jay, what are your thoughts?
Well,
Lots to talk
I
about money.
hate to go back a slide, but you said something, in fact, 4 months ago, you posted a video at an AHP talk where you talked about cut. You can't cut your way, this is paraphrasing, to success. And fiduciary responsibility is an obligation to the board, but that doesn't necessarily mean just not spending. It means, at least in my mind, it means spending wisely, including investing in resource development activities that generate more money for purpose. But I don't want to read too much into that. Can you talk a bit about that? What is the role of the board in terms of investing in things that bring more revenue?
Sure, absolutely. We cannot afford to be too tentative. And there was a great piece that was written, I think it was by Ann Goggins Gregory at Bridgespan Group, probably a decade ago, that was called, like, the nonprofit scarcity crisis or something. Then, of course, Dan Pallotta came on, and Dan was talking about a lot of the same things. We cannot fail to move our organization forward because we are not allocating our resources to support our success. Too often we have measured our success by how cheap we were, by how little we spent, by how little overhead we had. In reality, that often thwarted our ability to achieve impact. And so if you are, say, with an arts organization, your mission impact should be around, did we give people access to the experience of the arts? Not, did we spend less than 15 cents? We've got to think about, what is our real reason for being? Why did we wake up and come here today? And yet sometimes we've been so focused on being cheap that we've actually not advanced our mission. And so we underinvest in staff, we underinvest in infrastructure, we underinvest in programs. There are a lot of places that we just need to be a little bit bolder, because a little bit bolder means that more people will see our work, more people will be attracted to our work. Now, like, on one hand, you certainly can skew the other way. You don't need to be out there, spending money in a way that is not appropriate. But you know where the sweet spot is between being stingy and being overindulgent. You got to hit that sweet spot to make sure the organization is getting things done.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, philanthropia, I always go back to philanthropia from the Greek was about a love of humankind. Giving to our organizations is about expressing a love of humankind. Yes, we are sometimes talking to people about giving their money, but I also tell people all the time to please consider banning the word fundraising from your lexicon. Too often, fundraising is taken to something that is kind of, inappropriate, like we're going to going to twist their arms. We're going to make people uncomfortable. There's going to be a quid pro quo. And let's just stop that, because philanthropy is about making an investment in an organization with a noble mission that we believe in, and it's part of an expression of love of humankind. It is an invitation to relevance. It is an invitation to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And so I believe philanthropy is something that is beautiful. With that, it means we not only need to invite others, but we need to give ourselves. We need to give ourselves at a level that is commensurate with our personal financial ability and our level of interest in the organization. And that is going to be a unique number for every single person sitting around your board. So I do not care for a set contribution. Every board member should give X. Every board member has different means and different motivations. Every board member should decide for themselves what a good gift is, but all of them should find that they are inclined, moved, motivated, passionate to give something. If they look around and go, oh, do I have to give? They should not be on your board. There's something to be said for how we spend our money says something about what we believe in and care about. And if someone finds that they do not believe in and care about your board at a level that they would want to invest in its work, they probably shouldn't be around your table. Any thoughts, Jay?
If I say amen again, people are going to think we're at a service. But this is still a matter of some debate. Well, maybe because sometimes it's hard to know what exactly we should be asking for. And so since I absolutely understand what you mean. If we say everybody must give X, well, then that diminishes some people's opportunity and makes it hard for others. But is there a way to help people find for themselves what's an appropriate way to invest in the mission of the organization? How can we help them to be better board members, to engage them to give in a way that really shows their passion?
Sure. So, I mean, this is maybe a little bit too academic, but the typical American household gives 2.7% of their household income to charity every year. Most people give first to their religious organization. They give second to their alma mater. And so I often ask people to make us their third charity of choice. We're not going to become before those other organizations, but if they're spending 2.7% of their household income and we're their third beneficiary, they can see from there where we fit in.
Right. Well, that means that the people in this room who are at a university are in luck. You're number two.
No, you're number two. Or if you're in a church, number one. Number one.
We did have a question here, so I don't know if you want to tackle this now or later, but from Susan, who says, would love to hear your thoughts on setting a board goal. In fact, that's one of the things I was thinking about, that allows for individual giving, yet sets a framework for trustees. Do you think a board goal is sometimes helpful in that context?
I think it can be, particularly if you're in a campaign. If you're in a campaign, there is an expectation that the board gives a certain percentage of campaign often. So, if you're going to do it, I would sit down and I would be very thoughtful about it. Don't say, oh, everybody should give, roughly this. I would sit down and say, okay, let's think about Jane. Jane's involved in these things. We know that Jane, that her best gift has been to the local animal shelter, and that she gave this. What do we think would be an appropriate number to maybe talk to Jane about? It should be very custom in my mind, and you don't share that with the whole board. You do that kind of back of the house and figure out what you think could be appropriate. And let's all be honest, we all have great tools like DonorSearch, where we have a lot of business intelligence and analytics that would let us know what is likely within someone's reach. Utilize your tools and figure out what would be appropriate. But it's got to be something very custom, very thoughtful, very respectful, and then you still have to have the individual conversations.
Do you find that there's kind of an average for different sizes or types of institutions in terms of how much revenue tends to come from the board? I'm not saying what they should do, but just what tends to happen. Like in campaigns, we see, I think the Stephen Shattuck's survey indicated it was on average between 10 and 12% was coming from the board for a campaign. But do we have anything like that on an annual basis that's a measure of something?
Yeah, so, that's a number sadly that has been declining, that it used to be 20%, but I would say
Mm,
now it's probably closer to 10 to 15%. Even then you're often talking some really large numbers. But I think, I'm almost reluctant to focus too much on that because I believe there are a lot of people who do not have financial means who still have significant influence. And I don't want a primary filter for our board members to be how much money do they have to contribute. Now, certainly it is one of the considerations, but I think we've got to be really careful. There are a lot of people who have the ability to connect people of wealth and to invite them to come along with us who may not have significant personal wealth, or maybe at a point in their life that maybe they are at a point in their life they are reticent to make a gift of significance, but maybe they are thinking about giving from assets. I think we got to be careful about boxing people in or about excluding people just based on what we perceive their bank balance is.
thank you. It's a great cautionary note and a reminder, especially right here on this slide, because philanthropy is about love of mankind, not love of big wallets. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. So now you have clear roles and responsibilities. You have asked people to consider making a gift to the organization consistent with their affinity and their ability. If they find they do not want to participate in adding value to the organization in a way that is consistent with those things, then frankly, the gift to ask them for is the gift of their chair. That sounds really, really cold and heartless, and I'm sorry to say that. However, a chair around a board table is a rare and precious commodity. Your bylaws limit how many people can be around your table. If you have someone who doesn't care to come to meetings, doesn't care to read their board packet, doesn't care to make a gift, doesn't want to connect people, doesn't want to advocate for the organization, there is a point at which you must say true fidelity to the organization would be giving us your seat for someone who does desire to participate fully in the life of the organization. Now, I would say that is not your role as the executive director. That is the role of your governance committee. Your governance committee is charged with the care and the keeping of the board. But it also means that when we go through renominations every year, we don't say, oh, well, Susie doesn't come and Susie doesn't give and Susie doesn't help, but she's so nice. Let's invite her back. No, don't invite her back, because we are a steward of a community asset. We need to invite board members who are going to help us advance the mission.
By the way, I
Same
think everybody
day.
should get a chair that nice.
Yeah, I know. That's a nice chair, isn't it? It is. And with that, I think you've got to think about other ways for soft exits as well. One of the things that I've done with boards for a long time is at the end of every year, send everyone on the board a willingness to serve form to say, here are the roles and responsibilities. Here's your conflict of interest statement. Do you see yourself in a position that you want to serve again next year? Because the reality is that life changes, and maybe somebody signed up with excellent intentions and then their job changed, their responsibilities for their child or a parent changed, their health status changed. Sometimes things change. And so I think that even at the end of every single term, even if they are not due to roll off, it is a kindness to go to every person and say, do you want to roll back on the board next year? You still have a term that is going on. So just, lots of ways to kind of care and keep the board. I also frankly believe in term limits. I think that even if you have exceptional board members, they need a moment to roll off, to catch their breath, to get re-energized. And then if they want to come back to the board, they can. But term limits are a good governance practice for your board.
Mhm.
I here will beg you to not raise money for lemons. I see a lot of boards that are raising money for the extras, the also rans, the nice to haves, the we wouldn't do that if it weren't for money. I think you need to protect every philanthropic dollar coming into the organization as if it is the most scarce and precious resource that you have. That means that every dollar coming from philanthropy needs to be directed to the most important strategic aspirations of the organization. That means that if you work in a big, complex organization like a hospital or a university or a large church even, there's a strategic plan somewhere that says what their aspirations are for moving forward. You need to understand what your art museum, your animal shelter has already articulated are the most important and most transformational things to do, and only raise money for those things. Don't let it become something that you go, oh, well, we didn't get that approved in the budget. We'll just go ask a donor for it. Well, a donor doesn't want to fund something that was not smart enough and important enough to be funded by the organizational budget. So be a good steward of your organization and of your donors' intentions. Thoughts, sir?
Oh, just one, which is that, Betsy, does this go back to having clarity also on what it is we're supposed to be doing, like a strategic plan? So we won't, start building a pond in back when what we really need is another obstetrics wing or something.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And truly, there are places that we've built the pond in back instead of the obstetrics wing. So yeah, I love that. Let's go back to the strategic plan. Good. I'm going to keep charging. So, you just went right there, which is great. I think we got to know where we're going. And so not only does your organization need a strategic plan, if you work for a separate foundation, which some of you do, that serves the other nonprofit organization, that nonprofit also needs its own strategic plan. We need to know where we're going, how we're going to get there, what the likely obstacles are in our path, how we're going to measure our progress, how we're going to demonstrate our progress on the path to others, all those things in our strategic plan. I am astonished how many nonprofit organizations just wing it, or take last year's budget and add 3% to it and send it back through the board again, or take 5 years ago's plan and say, we're still doing the same stuff. I would say at least every 3 years, pull out a blank sheet of paper and start from scratch on your strategic plan, because the world is moving fast and changing. You need to innovate. You need to move the organization forward. The piece that goes with that is you've also got to make sure that you have the tools and resources for the journey. Tools and resources are not only like financial resources, but have you given your board the tools to be successful? What are you doing for board training, board development, board information? Because they're your team. This is your executive leadership team for your nonprofit. They are the ones who are setting the direction, who are ensuring that we're meeting our goals. So do they have all of the tools that they need to be successful? So Jay, any thoughts on the journey? All the stuff we're going to cram in our bag?
That's a lot of stuff there. I mean, one thing that you were just talking about really hit me, which is that there's always this opportunity to collaborate more effectively between staff and the board on the strategy, right? I wonder how much of the time a board anticipates being handed the strategy document from the staff, or maybe the staff dreads being handed a strategy document by the board. And that must be hard to generalize, but is there a way to make sure that there's good communication and conversation about that all the time, because everybody has something to contribute, but that the right people are doing the right thing? So the staff carries out its function, the board its.
Absolutely. I'm glad you went there, because I wasn't going to talk about this. I always go back to the legal fiduciary governance role says the board is responsible to ensure strategy was set. It does not say it is the board's role to craft the strategy. It's their role to ensure that strategy is set. So, think on your board, you have a lot of expertise. You have a lot of community insights. You have a lot of talent that's sitting around your board. However, on your staff side, you have significant subject matter expertise. That these are people who are accustomed to running this type of nonprofit organization, who deeply understand the stakeholders and the folks who are using your services. And so I find the great plans bring a little bit of both together. So I'll often make sure that we've included board members around visioning, talking about opportunity, possibility, innovation, other things, and then often rely on staff members to talk about where their industry is going, what their unique niche should be focused on, where there's opportunity for innovation based on evolving best practice or things they've seen in other successful organizations. I believe great strategy brings them both together. We're always stronger with more perspectives, more life experiences, and more professional knowledge, in my mind. All right, now let's talk about meetings for a moment. Meetings should not be a dog and pony show. Too many meetings, we show up, we talk at people, we want them to rubber stamp things, we bore them to tears, and then we start late and end late. It's terrible. And so, meetings are often the most visible symbol of your participation on the board. Those need to be great experiences. Start on time, end on time, have an agenda, follow it. Don't let people like go rogue in the middle of meeting. Once a vote is made, the vote is done. You don't then go back and revisit it. Utilize tools like a consent agenda so you cut down on all the boring committee reports. One of the things that I've found is most board members are intelligent and can pre-read information before they come in the boardroom. So, avail yourself of using everyone's time in that room to affect the greatest possible change. When you have people collected in the room, have time for discussion, delve into issues, do things that are kind of generative thinking. Don't go through a litany of boring reports that everyone is going to rubber stamp, because that's how you have a bunch of really high performing people who really hate coming to your board meetings. So make sure you've set up an experience that's going to be conducive to excellence.
Wow, I love that. And I also love the idea of having an actual dog and pony in the room, but I guess I'm not going to get that.
I know, darn, I'd love to have a dog and pony too. I do have a dog, but no ponies. No. Yes, the dog may visit us later. He keeps circling over here like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You've also got to have, in my mind, performance management, a dashboard. What's going on? What's going on? Like, it's great when you get in your car, you've got your speedometer, you've got your gas gauge, you can see what's going on with your oil, although I have no idea what to do with it, except when it gets to red and I know I have to go get someone to help me. But to just be able to look at what is going on in our organization right now. Are we making progress against our strategic plan? Are we meeting our metrics for fundraising? Are we doing an annual board evaluation to look at the board's own health? What are those things that we're doing to make sure we know where we are and what we need to fix? Because performance management, in my mind, is about the opportunity for refinement. It's not a gotcha. It's not a penalty system. It's a way that we make sure that we're all on track and going the same direction.
What's the equivalent of a check engine light in this scenario? Because there must be one, and then who's the mechanic?
I don't know. I'm afraid the check engine light might be the IRS. Let's avoid the check engine light at all costs. Yes. And then you've got to be able to change. So much of being successful these days is about agility. It's about innovation. And so, even if you have a mission that you must advance, I think you need to pull back and say, do we understand what our customers' needs are, what their wants are? What are those maybe unspoken things that we've maybe missed? Are we delivering our services in the right place through the right method? Are we allocating our budgets to the right thing? I think you've got to kind of pull back and look at your consumers with empathy on a regular basis to see if you know how they feel, what they want, where they want to be, what they'd say. And then you've got to look at the design of all the things that you're delivering out to them to make sure that you are really still fulfilling your mission at the level you need to. When you're not, when there's a disconnect, that's an opportunity for innovation, or for a pivot, a redirect, whatever it may be. But that takes agility and commitment. It also takes courage. There's courage sometimes to just say like, hey, we need to look at this, or we need to think through this, or do we know why we do this? So always thinking about how we're going to adapt to change and how we're going to drive innovation for our organization is also a big board responsibility in my mind. All right, sir, this is my last slide. I just left this in here. So if there's anything else we want to talk about on this beautiful journey that we have to go forward, I do have deep respect for boards. Boards bring considerable assets to our organizations. Again, their intelligence, their insights, their influence, their investment. I do believe board members come wanting to be engaged. It's our obligation to make sure we step forward and engage them in the right way. And they also want to be effective in building partnerships, whether those are donors or other service providers, other allies. So if we can really move to a place that we have engaged this amazing group of people in all the right ways and all the right places, we will be a force to be reckoned with.
No doubt. There is some stuff though in the luggage compartment here among the questions. So maybe we can do a little lightning round. Can I fire a few questions at you?
Sure. Go,
Okay.
go.
And we'll just start with them sequentially. So if I miss somebody's question, feel free to drop right back up in the Q&A or something like that. And the first one I think we got really early on was from Nancy, who had asked your thoughts about holding board members accountable to expectations. And you mentioned something about using personal action plans. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think if you don't hold people accountable, it's a race to the bottom. The things that you're willing to tolerate are the things that become the norm. And so if you say, oh, we have attendance expectations here, but you don't meet them, but that's okay. Well, now everyone else has permission to not come, to not give, to not help, to not whatever it is. And so I think you've got to very respectfully hold people accountable. I think you've also got to be careful though, about like assumptions of why they weren't there. I've told the story so many times, but there was a gentleman who was on a board that I was working for years ago, and people were kind of like, oh, where's he been? He was so interested, and then he disappeared. Well, come to find out, he'd had a significant medical emergency. And we should feel great shame, had been in our hospital and we didn't know that. And so, I'd say always reach out with like love and respect first and say, hey, I'm checking on you. What's going on? I know you were really excited about being on the board. We talked about these being the expectations and you're not there right now. How can I help you? And really your governance committee should be doing that. You should not necessarily be doing that, but definitely hold people accountable and also have larger accountability for the collective board, like an annual board evaluation where you get into the health of the board as a body, because the board as a body is also a collective entity that is worth looking at.
Betsy, is the pairing that you talked about, the buddy system on the onboarding process, does that also help with things like that? Because you've got a board chair, but on a national board, people may not be close friends in real life. They've met through this activity. And but if people are talking to their buddy on a frequent basis, maybe something like that would be caught.
Absolutely, because sometimes our expectations are downright opaque too. And so,
Right.
I think you got to make sure, do people know what the answer is to the questions on the test before we give them the test? So,
Sure.
making sure we've got clear standards and expectations, enforcing them. And you've got to decide where you are culturally. With a lot of boards, we even put things like attendance, did they give or not, but not the amount, on a board dashboard or score sheet that goes out to every single board member at every single board meeting. But you can't start there if your culture doesn't support it. But think about, what's the role of transparency in your organization and how comfortable are you with transparency?
Right. Anonymous, who's our most frequent attendee at these sessions, had asked, what's the perfect sweet spot on term limits for boards?
Oh, great question. So, it used to often be that you would have 2 consecutive 3-year terms. I flip that. I encourage people to have 3 consecutive 2-year terms because a lot of really busy people don't want to sign up for a 3-year term. That sounds like, from here to eternity, 3 years. And so it's often easier to recruit high-performing people to a 2-year term, but that 6-year cadence is still fairly nice. After the 6 years, they must roll off for 1 year, then they're eligible for re-election to the board. However, during the year that they're off, you don't have to lose their phone number. They can still be on non-board committees. They can still do other things for the organization. It's not like we, have a vow of silence not to contact them, but it's a great way to just safeguard the health of your board to have 3 consecutive 2-year terms, a year of roll off, and then you can come back.
Right. We had a question from Denise that I've heard so many times in so many different contexts about whether participation in activities, let's say it's a golf outing, would that qualify as, count as an annual donation? Any thoughts on that?
If they made a financial commitment to pay for their golf team, then sure, I would look at the fair market value though. Sometimes when you've got a golf tournament, by the time you back out the fair market value of their golf team and their shirt and their whatever else, the actual charitable contribution is very, very small. And so I think that I would at least, talk to somebody if, say they're giving $100 and they think they're giving $10,000, I would make sure they understand what impact is actually going to the organization through the golf tournament. But, certainly by whatever means they want to give, I think it's appropriate. And, one of the things we also get kind of wound up about sometimes is, let's say somebody is an executive at a significant corporation in the community and they're able to facilitate a gift from that entity. Do they get credit for it? On one hand, I would say, like, yes, they get credit for it, but I still personally think they must still give a personal gift because we all need to have our own skin in the game, not just the organization we work for. All of us need to write something out of our own checkbook, out of our own whatever it may be.
Yeah, it goes back to your first item, which is about commitment more than it's about accounting. So, and maybe because I know we have a bunch of questions here, and maybe what we can do is also pass those on to you, Betsy. But I'll just take one which seems kind of broad, and it came in from Joseph a little earlier, which is it a good question to ask the prospective new member, what do you want to get out of board membership?
Sure. I mean, and why do you want to serve? And, with all the other uses you have for your time, why this charity? Why board service at all? I think it's valuable to have an authentic two-way conversation to understand someone's values, aspirations, and intentions. Sure. Because frankly, if what they say to you is, what I want to get out of board service is access to a roster of potential clients, because I want to look at your donor list. Frankly, I want to be on the board because I want to be considered in the request for proposal for new contractors for your organization. Like if they're there out of self-interest, they're not your board member. If they're there out of missional, community, societal interest, they're your board member. So sure, ask them.
There's a lot here to unpack. We could talk with you all day, and hopefully we'll be able to entice you back to talk again. But thank you so much for this, Betsy. Really do appreciate you and all your insights as always.
Thank you. Thank you. And if anybody has questions they didn't get through, go find me on LinkedIn, send me your question. I'll do my best to answer you.
Right. I was just going to ask if you could, again, just maybe state how people can best find you. So that would be LinkedIn, of course. Oh, there we go. So if you're just listening to this instead of viewing it, there you are, Betsy Chapin Taylor, and Betsy at accordanthealth.com. You can also find her at Betsy Chapin Taylor on LinkedIn, and there's a phone number. I won't read that out loud, but all of that information is great. You'll find that she's a great person to follow and makes herself accessible to all of us who are trying to learn from a leader. And so thank you, Betsy, for everything you do and for today. And thank you to everybody who's been hanging out with us and asking these great, great questions. I hope you'll come back on Thursday when we have another session that you're going to enjoy, as well as listen to the podcast. Maybe when you're taking a walk around the neighborhood or working out at the gym, or all those things that we should all be doing. Put that in your ear. That's a fun thing to listen to as well. And you'll find, in fact, Betsy on there in the very near future. So I hope you enjoy all of that. You can find all of the details about our calendar over at DonorSearch.net. And while you're there, if you want to know something about the people serving on your board, or maybe in the future, or the people who did serve, all those people who might be ready to help you, check out DonorSearch's services. I'm sure that you'll appreciate those too. So with that, thanks for hanging out. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, take care.